here, on the very rim of known space, justice is a long way away.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian, and joining me, as always, is your co-host, Spaz.
I just wanted to tell you good luck. We're all counting on you.
I'm honestly surprised, to be honest, they never made a computer game out of that. Like, they made computer games out of so many other things. Like, did you know there's a computer game based on the British comedy Yes Minister? That was released in 1987? Yeah, I'm honestly shocked there was never an airplane game. Like a game based on the movie Airplane. That's honestly shocking, come to think of it.
Tangent number one.
Yep. Your co-host, Julie.
Hey, how you doing?
Your co-host, Thorsten.
Well, it's freezing cold here.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's relatively cold here, too, but that's a completely different type of cold. Your co-host, Jacob.
Yo, buddy. Still alive?
Nice.
Oh my God!
What's that? Is that a
That's
thing?
Ace Combat Zero.
Oh, no wonder I don't know that. I've only barely touched one Ace Combat game.
It might come up.
I wouldn't be surprised. And your co-host, David.
Those who have been alive long enough on a battlefield might feel invincible. I bet you do too, buddy.
Glad we went for the same game here.
Is that also Ace Combat
You
Zero?
have the same character.
Oh, God.
Yes.
There's one fella in Ace Combat Zero who could best be described as endlessly quotable.
Oh, he is.
Oh, just a little bit.
Just a smidgen.
So, friends, today's topic came out of a discussion from last week's show. Last week's show, we're dating this. We usually try not to date these very much, but last week's show was the first show of 2024 as we record this. And as we were talking about, things to talk about for that show, Thorsten was like, we should talk about the rise of these, whatever you want to call them, sim lights, accessible flight sims, because there are a few
that's
of them.
the thing.
Yeah.
We should start with defining what the hell that is.
So yeah, that's a good point. So we thought let's table it and make a complete separate show out of it. So that's why we're here. So basically, a friend of mine who used to work for gaming magazines named Denny, he used to write about flight sims for I think it was Computer Gaming World back in the day. One of the big magazines. Remember magazines, you guys?
I do.
Yeah.
Still buy them.
Wow, really?
There's one singular gaming magazine in this country that is somehow managing to survive against all odds.
Wait, are we talking a print magazine?
Yeah.
Wow, what's it called?
CD Action.
CD Action. Wow, good on them. Good on them because wow.
I don't know how they're surviving, but I've seen them on store shelves as of today.
Wow.
So clearly they're still intact.
Wow, apparently I look them up on Google here, and one of the first things that comes up in their, site links, when you look up a thing and they've got like indented links about the thing underneath it. One of their links is about Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which is funny.
Yep. Obvious joke.
I was just playing that on my phone the other day. The way he describes is there are two types of flight sims: plane focused flight sims and pilot focused flight sims. Now, and I think this is a great way to describe it, so it's what I'm going to stick with. So plane focused flight sims, you got your DCS, you got your IL-2, you got your modern air combat, going all the way back to SU-27, basically. Also some of the Jane's games like F-15, F-18, the more plane longbow, those are the more plane focused or aircraft focused sims where you have were you going to say something, Thorsten?
Yeah, and don't forget Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the more plane / aircraft focused sims. And then you have your more pilot focused sims, which are more about building a good dynamic campaign, maybe having a story-based campaign, a little more, not as fiddly, don't have as much in the way of fidelity. You don't have to spend half an hour turning the plane on, that kind of thing. You can just kind of jump in and go. And Microprose was like an expert at these. A lot of the Jane's games, a lot of the other Jane's games like Fighters Anthology, World War II Fighters, and then some Rowan games like Mig Alley were a little more, let's build a world around the pilot and give them a plane to do stuff with. And that's the kind of sim that I enjoy. And for a while, we've had primarily one type of flight sim, which has been dominated by DCS and IL2. And that's the plane I could talk today. Focused simulation, where, of course, you have a specific plane modeled in excruciating detail,
with all the clicky switches,
with all the switches and all the buttons and all the things. And I feel there are enough flight sim fans that there should be room for both in this world, but the accessible sims died off. Now, you had the occasional outlier over the last several years. There was like arcade. They're like, of course, the Ace Combat games on consoles, and there were some other.
But to call them simulating anything is pushing it.
Yeah, but they were.
No, they're arcadey.
They're arcadey, but they're still more pilot focused. Give a pilot a plane and have them do stuff in this world we've created. So they're very much on the arcade side of things, but still I see them more into the kind of sim, kind of flight game that I enjoy. And I guess another way you could put it is there's a plane simulation and a flight game, and I lean more toward the flight game. And there have been a few here and there, but recently we've had several flight games / sims come out. I think the one that really started this trend off was probably Tiny Combat Arena, that has been in early access for a couple of years now, I think. And I think that's the one that I kind of feel like it started this trend of the more like looking back to the 90s type of accessible and approachable pilot sim. I feel like it started this trend. What do you guys think? Am I wrong in that? Because I
think I agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there were other like sims here and there, but I think the buzz around Tiny Combat Arena got the ball rolling. Like I think if you look with space games, for example, I think FTL is the game that really can be accredited as starting the space game resurgence we're currently in. And on its heels were, of course, Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen. But
with all the consequences thereof.
Yeah. But if you have to look back to a singular game that I think has started this resurgence, I think in the case of this particular episode, we can talk about Tiny Combat Arena. And Y485 had been working on like the prototype for Tiny Combat Arena for ages. Like he'd release little videos on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter, by the way. I'm still calling it that. He'd release prototypes.
It had another name?
Allegedly.
Say what you want about dead naming. I am calling Twitter because I feel like what it's calling itself
because it's funny.
That's not a dead naming thing. This is what it is in the zeitgeist. That doesn't need to change.
Well, I feel like it's that. I know tangent, but I feel like it's now that guy in college who called himself the Edge or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you know that guy in college who gives himself a stupid name that wants you all to call him that. I don't know if you guys had that, but I had friends in college who called themselves things and preferred you call them that thing. And we're like, fine, even though your name is Frank, I'll call you this other thing. So that's what I feel Twitter is doing. Like it's not really whatever it is, it's still Twitter. You know what I mean? So I feel like Twitter is that guy in college who preferred being called the magician or some shit. You know, it's like, no, I'm not calling you that. I'm just not. Your name is Jim.
Flight sims, ladies and gentlemen.
Anyway, so the hype around Tiny Combat Arena had been building for a while before it actually became available on Steam, and I think that showed other developers, hey, there's a market for this, and so you now have a few other games coming out. That is starting to signal a trend toward a resurgence, like we've seen with space games. For example, Nuclear Option, which came out in early access a month or two ago, I think, and is, oh God, that's good. I don't know if you guys have played Nuclear Option, but holy moly, it's very good, you guys.
It's simply a surprising great game. I'm really surprised that this one came out. That someone had the balls to name it correctly.
I know.
To do such a game, yeah.
And the funny thing is, the developer of Tiny Combat Arena is like, oh my God, this game is so amazing. He's like talking it up over his own game. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I played it. It is really good.
Yeah, even at these early stages, it doesn't really have a campaign or anything of much yet. It's just mostly missions. It has a mission editor. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's largely just you're thrown into a massive blob of people shooting each other, which is fun, though it gets a bit stale. But objectively, it is fun.
But it's also impressive because there's also like a ground war going on on the map. There's trucks moving about. There's supplies already. Like, he's already kind of got a dynamic thing going on. I don't know if I want to call it a campaign, but like like kind of a war scenario going on this one map that they have so far. It's actually really impressive. So yeah, and then there's Helicopter Gunship DEX. Now that developer, he originally wanted to make a like kind of an F-19, like a modern F-19, but he's like, I need to build the bones of a flight sim first. So he kind of narrowed it down to a helicopter sim so he can get the flight engine, the campaign going, all that stuff. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to Helicopter Gunship DEX, but my God, it's coming along beautifully.
Glad to hear, because I have not been paying attention, sadly.
Yeah, he updates it. Oh, go ahead, Thorsten.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty much in line with the original Gunship and Gunship 2000, or maybe even LHX. But I tend more into the direction of Gunship 2000.
Yeah.
It's really made cool.
Yeah, he's.
There are so many things in the game, like the idea of integrating the side machine guns, for example. I don't know if it's implemented yet, but it's planned at least. Yeah,
he recently implemented wingmen, which I think is going to go in a Gunship 2000 kind of direction with those. I think there's infantry
that was
in the
game where you had like the whole thing.
Yeah, well, if you're unaware, I'm streaming it now because it's, in my opinion, I think Gunship 2000 is like the best example of the kind of sim I am talking about here, with the accessible, approachable, pilot-focused sim, where it's also a game. You know, there's also a game that you're, playing. It's not just the plane itself is not the game. But Helicopter Gunship DX is leaning in that Gunship 2000 direction, which is, I mean, it's also kind of going in the Longbow direction, which is good because Longbow 2 especially is, a lot of people consider.
It's also really good.
Yeah, a lot of people consider like one of the best helicopter flight sim game things you could possibly get. It's a shame it's not available digitally, but it's also get a bear to run on modern hardware. And I wish that there were more examples of games that people could actually buy of this kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, you could buy Pacific Air War, you can buy F-19 and F-117, but you can't buy Gunship 2000, you can't buy Longbow 2. You can't buy Mig Alley. You can't buy. Yep.
You can at least buy Mega Fortress.
Yeah, that's true. And Mega Fortress. Oh God, so good. And even
really good.
And that's a high fidelity sim for 1991, like with the switches and everything.
Well, that's fair.
But
that is fair.
But at the same time, it does a good job of still being approachable, as approachable as a sim in 1991 was, I guess.
Yes, one where you have to manage an entire strategic bomber by yourself.
Now, I want to talk about the one game that I think skirts both of these worlds really well, and that's Falcon 4. Because Falcon 4 is Falcon 4 is a detailed simulation of the F-16, but it's also got maybe one of the most amazing dynamic campaign engines in all of flight sims, because they basically designed it as a war game. And because of that, it's got a whole ground war going on. You could just leave it going and watch the war unfold. I did that when I first got it. You can
just sit at home.
Yeah, you can just have it going and watch the war unfold over hours. And even if you never fly a mission, the war is still ongoing and you can watch it on the map. And the BMS, is that what's called? BMS, I think. Project is taking it more in the plane focus, like the kind of the more DCS direction. But at the same time, it's still got that amazing campaign engine. So
that never left.
Yeah, so that I think that's kind of the one sim that exists in both worlds is Falcon, even with BMS, I think, because it's got that amazing engine that still is very playable. You can still play the original today if you want it to play it a little less what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like if you don't want your balls kicked as hard as BMS would kick them.
If you don't want the full fidelity sim, as is the technical term.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Now, Jacob, let's turn to you for a second, because you have lived in that other world that we're...
Yes, I have in fact played DCS World, still do. I have played IL2, still do. I find it personally remarkably enjoyable, but I also see why people would bounce off of it. Not everyone... The big thing is, again, these games are somewhat designed around fans of a specific plane, rather than being good/solid games in general. And you can tell if you actually follow the development of both where the priorities lie. Now, IL2 is a lot better. It actually has a dynamic campaign and a fairly good, what's it called? Fairly good career system. But also, it's a game where you have to manage your fuel mixture, your prop pitch angle, and your throttle, and your radiators, and your superchargers.
Yeah,
all of it.
Yeah. There really isn't a dumb mode for IL2 either. Like you can turn.
There is an argument we had that there is. It's called War Thunder, but also Jesus Christ, no.
No, I can't. No, people don't do War Thunder. Just don't.
Save yourself the everything.
You'll if you find yourself liking it, you're already lost. And if you don't like it, you just wasted your time. But if you like it, you'll never. It's a quicksand pit that you'll never get out. Just don't. Just if you've never touched War Thunder, just don't. Please.
But yes.
So what? Go ahead. Sorry.
But yes, though hilariously enough, DCS World for the first time in a decade has in fact Eagle Dynamics has in fact stated they are properly working on a dynamic campaign.
What?
I have no idea what it's going to look like, but it's happening. Trademarked.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'll believe when I see it, but I'm glad
that's entirely fair. Eagle Dynamics has a tendency to make their release date some equivalent of 2 weeks trademarked, which is roughly the same release schedule as Star Citizen.
Yep.
Wait, that has a release schedule, does it? Really? Does have a release schedule?
They did make a roadmap to the roadmap one time. And
all right, they did make the roadmap for the roadmap.
All roadmaps lead to roadmaps.
All roadmaps lead to Rome. Rome maps.
I'm glad they've announced I guess that they're working on one, but like, yeah, okay, maybe it'll come out someday. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
It's like having a trailer for a trailer.
Yeah,
which they also did, but yeah, the progress is inevitably slow, and the vast majority of work at DCS is still done by third-party developers, not by Eagle Dynamics.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I didn't know
it's
that.
similar to actually Microsoft Flight Sim. There is a lot of third-party developers because one Russian studio developing all of these planes to full fidelity is not possible.
Oh,
not for lack of trying, but they have. But a lot of the work is done by third-party developers, including the Tomcat.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. I thought it was all in-house, but that actually makes sense because they do seem to pump out new aircraft on a fairly regular basis. So it makes sense that they
on a decently regular basis.
Yeah,
yes, though there's still a lot of fiddliness with that.
Given how much work goes into them, I mean, I'm not a fan of the product, but I can't help but marvel at the work that's gone into it. I mean,
that's fair.
And
I'll be honest, the reason why I enjoy DCS personally is a combination of two things. One, there is a lot of both paid for and free campaigns that are remarkably good once you get the plane rolling. And two, the actual player base took it upon themselves to do the absolute best they can with the game to create good modules and service and dynamic multiplayer for a variety of eras and a variety of options.
Yeah,
the problem is, of course, the accessibility, because every plane is modeled down to the tiniest detail, which means that in order to turn on the damn thing, you have to spend like 15 minutes aligning the inertial navigation system, turning on the auxiliary power unit, then the main engine, then the other main engine, then remembering to turn off the auxiliary power unit, then powering up the multifunction displays in a specific order, otherwise they break.
I wish you were exaggerating, but I know for a fact
I am
you
not
are
exaggerating.
I know for a fact you are
on
not.
On the F-18, you distinctly have to turn on the right engine, then the left engine, otherwise the battery breaks for some reason.
Oh, for God's sakes.
And the F5... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
For someone like me, who is insane, that's very fun and very rewarding to learn. But most people aren't insane.
Yeah. What were we gonna say, David?
Yeah, the F5 in DCS doesn't have power built into the craft, so you have to connect it to the ground crew so they turn on the power. And if you don't ask them to remove the power, they will actually yell at you when you start running away.
Because the power cable's still connected, you're just going to rip it out.
And again, I'm not knocking this. I am really glad that this exists for people who want it. Absolutely.
It can be fun. I think it is. But
the problem is those people took over flight sims for almost 2 decades. And
yes.
I mean,
partially, I wouldn't necessarily say they took it over because of a monopoly. They took it over because no one was really making flight sims.
Well, not only that, but this started. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. I'll rant after you.
The reason why these highly complex flight sims stuck around for so long is a kind of because the people who play them are the sort of people to invest a ton of money, effort into learning them and to be like startlingly loyal. Which means they will stick around with those sims through thick and thin. Whereas more casual gamers, they will probably move on to something else. So if you end up in a drought like we are right now, then only the very commonly played and games with a very persistent player base will stick around. That being said, now that we're having somewhat of a resurgence of less insane flight simulators, that might change.
I mean, I was gonna rant that I blame a lot of the DCS thing on back in the day when Longbow 2 was released.
You'll have to give us the specifics.
Well, back in the day when Longbow 2 was released in the late 90s, Andy Hollis, who created Longbow 2, F-19 for God's sakes, he was driven out of gaming entirely by the hardcore rivet counters who couldn't let anything go about the quote-unquote realism of Longbow 2. It was so toxic. He left gaming. He left flight sims. Like I
Goodness grief.
Yeah. And so I think that started this whole trend more toward the rivet counters. That's what I'm going to call them. Sorry. The rivet counters taking over flight sims for a long time because they were the loudest minority, I think. And there was also kind of there were fewer people buying joysticks and more people buying consoles also. That's why Free Space 2 failed, for example. So there was already a trend away from the joystick. So this didn't help. But I think the downward trend of these accessible flight sims really started with this Longbow 2 nonsense in the late 90s. And for a while, people were like, you know what, screw these people. We're not going to make anything for them. And thank goodness for some developers who have made, like there was some accessible flight sims on consoles. We talked about Ace Combat. But there was also, remember Birds of Steel, which came out on the 360 and the PlayStation 3?
Wasn't that from the War Thunder devs?
It was. And I will tell you what, guys, those games are exceptional. They have multiple dynamic campaigns across a couple dozen maps. And they can go, the only downside to these campaigns, you can't save during them, but they don't last long either. And you can also, like, whatever you level up and acquire as you play, you get to keep even if you quit the campaign. So even if you play the campaign for a couple hours and quit, you still get to keep your progress. But see, Lewis, I didn't think they were that hard. I've played it both on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. I have it for both of them. And it's one of my favorite World War II flight sims, honestly, because there's just so much content for it. And it's so much fun. And it's still, even a decade or so later, still a gorgeous game, I think. But that's kind of proto War Thunder because it's almost entirely, I mean, there is some multiplayer to it, but it's got so much single player content. That's why I prefer it over their later games because it's got a ton of single player content. So there were a few here. Whoa, the Battle Stations games. Remember those? Battle Stations, Midway
and
Pacific.
The other one, Pacific. I played one of those.
Yeah, those were.
Though to call those flight sims is pushing it since they were everything sims.
Right. I mean,
there were Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe.
Secret Weapons
that got console ported as well.
Yes. Oh, actually, no. Secret Weapons over Normandy was the sequel to Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe. If I may be a pedant,
right? Okay, fair.
If I may be a pedant, if I may be a pedant, Secret Weapons over Normandy is the one that came out in 2003-ish. So
PS2.
Yeah, it was on the PS2 and the PC. Yes, I have it for the PC. I should get it for the PS2.
Yeah, then there's Crimson Skies.
Which, oh God, of course.
Oh,
Crimson Skies. Oh my God. Oh my God.
This one needs a remake.
They're both. I have both. I have both the PC and Xbox Crimson Skies because they're very different. They're not the same game. You'd think they would be, but no, they're different.
No, they're not.
Completely different games. Both excellent, by the way.
They're from that era of console ports. The really weird, tiny one where people just made a different game.
Yeah. So there were like we were drowning. We were dying in a desert, and there were drips of water given to us fans every now and again. That would be like, oh, here's something. But it was kind of like the dark ages of space games, where you get a little something every now and again. And, oh, that's it for however long. But now we're starting to see more and more. And Thorsten, you brought up another good one that came out even years ago called VTOL VR, which is still getting updates, which is still getting new stuff.
So it's on the border to the hardcore stuff like DCS. I
would say because it's VR and that means they want to do all the switches and things. I agree with you, but at the same time,
but honestly, having looked at it, the switches are far more straightforward and far less.
Yeah.
You have to push 57 buttons to turn on the engine. Because I'll be honest, the one thing about Battle of DCS plays, you have a lot of switches that are just there for you to start the plane and don't actually do anything. You never use them.
No, it's far more accessible, really.
Yeah,
in contrast to DCS.
I would put it. If I was going to put VTOL VR on a level of something, I'd put it on the same level of realism as, say, EF 2000, because you got some switches there, and you got a bit more fidelity than your usual. But they still focus a little more on the gameplay side of things than this. Yeah,
it's a spectrum there, but it's a spectrum that I'm glad exists, and there should be more of it.
Yeah, and they just added a new plane. If you guys aren't aware, VTOL VR is an excellent flight sim. It is VR only, sadly. I don't know if they're ever going to implement a pancake mode at this point. Which is
that a technical term?
Well, that's what a lot of people call, flat monitor games.
The
non-VR pancake mode. I first learned about that with Star Trek Bridge Crew.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But that's
I will gladly play VTOL VR if it ever gets put into pancake mode, because I know that's rich coming from me, who has spent a lot of money on flight sticks already, but I don't really want to dump my cash on a VR headset for basically one game.
Like, I love VR. I have a Quest 2, and I use it more for exercising than for gaming, to be perfectly honest. It's a fine device. It's just, and I know a lot of people love VR, but I just see it as like, oh, it's another thing I have to turn on. It's a barrier.
It feels like there's a new VR headset that's better than all the other ones coming out every month or so.
The Quest 3 just came out, and I think that's probably going to be the one to beat for a long time, because it's fairly affordable as these things go. And it works with Quest 2 games, of which there's a huge library. It works on your PC.
All right, that's the one that can kind of be a sort of portable console. Also, allegedly, chat says that you can mod VTOL VR into pancake mode, though that sounds jank.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I mean, it's Damson. We're not worthy. He is like he's like the authority on these kind of things, in my opinion. I believe that there's a mod, but I don't. How does I
might try it.
I'm curious to try it.
Supremely fiddly.
Yeah, like, do you have to have some track VR thing to make up for the VR, or track IR? Excuse me. Do you have to have some kind of head tracking to make up for the VR? Lack of a VR helmet?
It sounds like something with a bunch of asterisks on it, because we know how video games work, and when you try to convert a video game to such an extent, manually as a user, things might break.
Oh, he says it works quite well. Okay.
It helps to have track IR. I admittedly have that, so I might try it just on that metric.
I too have it. Damson, if you on the Discord server can maybe post a couple of links in the Flight Sim channel to those mods, if you know where they are, that'd be very helpful, because I actually am curious to try them out. Because I'm like, every time I think about playing VTOL VR, I'm like, oh, I gotta break out the helmet. Okay, I gotta.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing.
It's a thing.
You have to do the setup.
And I love VR.
It's an event.
I'm glad I bought VR. I love that I have that option. But I'd say 3% of my gaming is VR. Maybe 2.
And for that 3%, you have to do a lot of setup.
Yeah, I gotta get the chair. I gotta clear the floor. I gotta make sure the battery's charged. Oh my gosh, some other thing. I gotta. Oh, when was the last time I washed the face cover? Okay, yeah. VR is a lot of extra stuff that I just most of the time don't feel like dealing with. Like, I use it for exercise, and that's mostly it. And it's got some great, like, if VTOL VR released a Quest native version, so I didn't have to do the whole PC nonsense with it, I'd buy that in a heartbeat. 100%.
That might be somewhat difficult, but not impossible.
I mean, there are flight sims on the Quest. There's a couple of several. Yeah, there's Pilot Wings 1 and 2, which are great. There's a couple of World War II. There's someone making. They're also on Steam, but like there's a World War I, there's a World War II. He just released a modern one. They're pretty good. There's a helicopter one. There are quite a few
magicians working on the Oculus.
Well, it's actually not a bad system, like really. And there are several flight sims on the Quest that are pretty damn good.
How much processing power can you stuff into a headset?
I mean, the graphics you're looking at maybe, PlayStation 2 era, I mean, the graphics aren't great,
okay,
but
fair.
But for what they do, they're pretty fun, I mean, you're using the controllers as the sticks and everything.
Yeah, and if memory serves, then a lot of the like native Oculus games have a version, either have or are a mode with downgraded graphics, which I mostly know that off of VR chat.
Yeah, exactly. And the Quest 2 is a surprisingly capable machine on its own. I'm sure the Quest 3 is better. That just came out though.
It has a bigger number. That means it's better.
Well, I mean, it's quite a bit better, to be honest. But until my Quest 2 dies, I see no reason to get one because I don't use my Quest 2 that often. But if the VTOL VR folks released a Quest native version, I'd buy it today, 100%. No question. I would waste my monthly gaming budget on buying that. Because setting up the thing to use the PC is just an extra hassle I most of the time don't want to deal with. But that is a great sim. That is a great sim. And there are quite a few of these. I mean, we've talked about Nuclear Option. We've talked about Stealth Fighter DEC. So there are more of these coming out, which is great because I would love to see a trend of this continue because, for years we didn't get much. We had to keep playing the old sims, which a lot of which are still available. Like folks, if you've never played a flight sim before and you're listening to this podcast, go find a copy of Microprost's F-117A. It's been on sale on GOG for as cheap as 89 cents, and it is probably one of the most approachable and accessible flight sims you can start with, and still plays great to this day. I started streaming it last week, had a great time. Still very playable, still tons of content. Oh my god, you can play it for years and not run out of things to do because the missions are randomly generated. So yeah, even the old sims, a lot of them you could still buy. I mean, yes, there's abandonware and yada yada yada, but we can't really promote that. We want people to pay for things. So there's still a lot of these older, accessible, approachable.
We want people to pay for good things.
Yeah, we do want people to pay for good things, and yeah, you can a lot of these games aren't for sale anymore digitally, which is like, God, can you imagine if somehow they started selling the Jane's games digitally, like all of them?
Yeah, but aren't these in super hell in terms of copyright?
A lot of them are, especially the Jane's games. I think there's no clear owner to the copyright because I think back in the day they were co-owned by Jane's and Electronic Arts. So with those especially, I think there's a real question about who owns those copyrights. Yeah. Thorsten?
IP law strikes again. Go ahead, Thorsten.
Just as you mentioned, the Jane's simulations, I really would love to see a re-release of USAF and IAF. To be honest.
Yeah,
I love both games, but I'm not really sure if they could be converted to modern machines.
I think so far the only way I've gotten them working is with emulation. I've got a friend of mine set up this custom 86 box build for me that uses Windows 98 SE. And so far, that's the only way I've gotten both of those games to run is through basically Windows 98 emulation. And they're not bad.
It works.
It does. They're not bad. If you want to go through the rigmarole of getting legal copies, converting those to ISOs, and then getting 86 box to run Windows 98 SE. You have to have a legal copy of Windows 98 SE, by the way, to do that. Yeah,
it's fiddly.
It's a lot of work, and that's why I didn't mind paying my friend to do it for me. I paid him money. I sent him a USB stick, and I'm like, do this.
Go nuts.
He sent me the stick back with a bunch of stuff on it, and it worked. It works great. I've run Mig Alley on the damn thing, which is Mig Alley is one of the hardest games to get running, and I got that running. But yeah, I too prefer the more survey side of the Jane's family, the IAF, USAF, World War II fighters, Fighters Anthology. Man, I thought I thought those are the best. So yeah, those are the kind of sims I love, and we do seem to be seeing an upward tick in those, which is just a delight. Because friends, these games, if you click with a game like this, it's so satisfying to fly to a target and blow it up. I wish I could recommend the Strike Fighters games, but they seem to have been abandoned. Like, you know what's sad about those? Strike Fighters 2, by the way, folks, is an amazing flight game, because not only are they fun campaigns and they have great planes like the A-10 and the F-4, and they've got dynamic campaigns and they're very approachable. They'll start you off 5 minutes from the target. You fly around, pew, 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 you drop your stuff on the target, you hit escape, mission success. You just spent 10 minutes,
Yep.
you got your flight sim fix. The sad
Go
thing,
nuts, as they say.
well, the sad thing is they seem to be abandoned, because even people who are buying them, they're not getting their download links, apparently. So, and they've heard nothing from the company. So I wish I could.
That is highly unfortunate.
Oh my God. I wish I could recommend them, because not only are they great games in themselves, the mods for those games, you if you want to fly the Falklands War, you can do it in combat. You can do it in that game. If you want to fly like the most random air war ever, it is available. It is probably available as a mod for that game. There are so many campaigns and missions and planes and things to fly in Strike Fighters 2 that's just, it's kind of like the Free Space 2 of flight sims, really, because it's just so much fun on its own. Plus, you're buying, you get access to so many mods for it. But I wish I could recommend it. I know it's $100 for the full package, but you get so much in that package, so very much. But yeah, apparently people who even are paying for it aren't getting their product. It's just,
that's bad.
and what's sad is they're still the folks who are making that thing are still around making things. They're focused entirely on mobile, which is just, I mean, I guess that's fine.
Which is very sad.
I know it's fine if that works for them, but like they're completely ignoring their I went on their Discord because I was having a problem with a PC game I bought from them, and I got no support at all. Like, I was completely ignored by the people who work. Yeah, it was so depressing. It was enraging, actually. I quit days later because like no one was answering my questions. It's like, why are we even giving you money? You know. So that's kind of a sad story in all this, but the nice thing is there are these accessible, approachable pilot sims that you can buy today, like Tiny Combat Arena, like Gunship, Helicopter Gunship DEX, that are great. And I would love to see more of them. And that's why we talked about this, because a lot of these look like they might be coming out this year, like hitting 1.0 this year.
Soon trademarked.
Yeah, soon trademarked. And like Tiny Combat Arena is a lot of fun. It's very challenging. I have to turn the difficulty down in that one because I die very quickly in Tiny Combat. That's why I didn't make a video of Tiny Combat Arena. I'm like, wow, I died in a minute. I died in less than a minute. Thanks, anti-air.
Admittedly, you fly the Harrier in that game, which is not the most resilient of jets.
No, that's true. But still, I die so fast. So very fast.
They're famous for being remarkably unforgiving, thanks to Pilot.
Yeah, but you can fly that thing with a mouse and keyboard. That's another nice thing. You don't need a joystick with a lot of these sims, and a lot of these are Unity based, which good or bad. But there's a plugin for Unity that makes joysticks and mouse control and everything very, very much more accessible to the developer. I forget what it's called. But it makes
in theory, because I've talked to the dev of what was it called? Frontier's Reach, which is
Oh,
related to the topic.
sort of. Yeah. I have.
And he has been lamenting a lot about how the Unity joystick plugin is an absolute nightmare to work with, and it's only good insofar as it's better than nothing.
Well, that is fair. That is fair.
And honestly, considering how much trouble I had with it, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Guys, something different regarding to Tiny Combat Arena. Has one of you ever tried the other versions of Tiny Combat Arena?
You mean like one of some of the older ones, the ones on Edge?
Yeah, the ones on Edge.
I played one like way back.
Yeah, I tried one like ages and ages ago. Yeah, ages ago.
Because some of them really look interesting.
He has iterated on this quite a lot over the years.
Understatement of the century, there, right?
Yeah, he is iterated so much. Oh, and if you guys want to hear a fascinating interview, I'll find the link at some point. But the guys who are making Gunner Heat PC, the tank game.
I'm searching it.
Oh, thank you.
Wait a moment.
They just interviewed.
They
just interviewed Y485, and he has some great things to say about flight sims and flight sim games. It's a fascinating interview.
Both great games, mind you. Though obviously GHPC is a tank game, so outside the scope of the conversation.
But in a way, that's also kind of leaning back toward the more accessible simulation because it's kind of trying to be more of a modern M1 tank platoon. Which,
yes, though admittedly, unlike plane sims, tank sims have been suffering even more, I would argue, since your only real option is, once again, War Thunder.
I mean, if you want to spend a lot of money, you can get Steel Beast Pro. But,
which, A, costs all the money, and B, isn't it like still like 10 years old at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of fun... What's that one tank sim by Graviteam that's on Steam that is really good? Not Steel Beast. Hang on, I'll find it.
What
was that? What was that?
Steel Armor Blaze of War, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so because I think that's it. Yeah, because that is a yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is it. Graviteam make a strategy game, but they also made this pretty fun, approachable tank game called Steel Armor, Blaze of War that I am not great at, but it is actually quite fun. But Gunner Heat PC is a upcoming, fairly accessible tank game. Like it's got some realism, but you're not going to spend an hour turning on the tank. It looks like it's going to be a mod.
Admittedly, tanks have the upside is they are usually started with one button.
But Gunner Heat PC does look like it's going to be kind of a modern homage to the M1 Tank Platoon games, and I think you can get the original M1 Tank Platoon games on Steam, and they are both great, both of them. Even the original one, which looks really old at this point, but it's a great tank game. It's a great tank game.
Yeah. Also, so in chat mentioned IL-2 actually has tanks now, and I would argue they're more fun than the planes.
Really? I forgot that IL-2 has tanks.
Mostly because tanks, unlike planes of the era, which have all the levers and all the buttons, tanks of the era are surprisingly straightforward.
I forgot about that there were tanks in Great Battles. I completely forgot about it because I typically don't care that much about tanks typically, unless they're their own game.
Fair enough.
Like if there are planes or tanks, I will always take planes every time. But if you just have tanks, happy to play a tank game. But if I have an option,
it is to not a lot of people play the tanks in IL-2, but they are very good.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear.
And if memories remind me, aren't they actually co-op? Chat, help me out here.
I think they are. I think you're correct. Honestly, I think you're right that they are multi-crew, which is another impressive thing. put multiple people in a tank.
In fact, I would argue that multi-crew is some of the most fun I've had in simulators, and in DCS, my favorite jet is still the F-14 Tomcat, because strangely enough, I'm not the best at flying planes. I'm exceptional at managing systems and stuff. Doing both is a bit difficult. So being the guy in the rear seat of an F-14, operating the most complex radar ever put on a plane, I enjoy it a lot.
Oh, then you definitely want to get that new F-14 in VTOL VR.
Yeah.
Once you get VTOL.
I remember it is in fact multi-crew as well, and you do in fact sit in the rear seat and operate all of the fancy systems that were given it.
And I'm seeing more and more missions coming out using their new electronic warfare stuff, which is great. Yeah, I really appreciate that games like VTOL VR and Nuclear Option have mission editing tools to let people make more content for them beyond what the designers make. That's always good. That's always good. But I do love a good career mode, and I'm glad IL-2 has one now.
Yay!
Another good sim with a career mode. The only reason it's accessible is because it's a World War I sim, and so there aren't a lot of switches. Wings Over Flanders Fields, which is based off the campaign engine from Microsoft Combat Flight Simulator 3, which is admittedly a very good campaign engine. But Wings Over Flanders Field might have one of the best campaigns I've ever seen this side of Falcon 4. Like, it's so good. And because it's World War I, it's kind of easy to jump into. I mean, you could turn the realism down, thankfully, and there are definitely aids to help you target things and find and autopilots and things. So it is a bit fiddly because it's basically a giant mod. It's a giant mod that they sell as a standalone product now. But yeah, Wings Over Flanders Fields, like that game. If you shoot down an enemy plane, you can't just take credit for it. You have to go back and make your case that you can get credit for it, which is great. Which is great. It's fun.
Welcome to the First World War, everyone.
Yeah, Wings Over Flanders Fields, y'all. If you like World War I aircraft, that's probably my favorite out of all the World War I stuff. Rise of Flight is okay, Patrick, but it doesn't really have the gameplay as... I mean, it is free. You're paying, $50-$60 for Wings Over Flanders Field, but what you're paying for is the career mode, which is absolutely exceptional. Just exceptional in Wings Over Flanders Fields. So I could easily recommend that one as a fairly accessible one. That one's been around for years, but that's a boutique product, that one.
Boutique product.
Yeah, that's you're not going to find that on Steam, I don't think. Like ever. Sadly. Which is a damn shame. Yeah, so there are sims that are accessible, and I'm so glad there are more coming out because my God, I mean, for us flight sim fans, it's been like accessible, approachable flight sims, pilot sims, whatever you want to call them. It's been slim pickings for a long time. Like, do I want to try and find something recent, or do I want to go back to 1991?
Those are generally your options.
Yeah, those have generally been our options. But so if the developers of the games we've talked about hear this, thank you for taking a chance on this relatively long dead type of simulation and starting to bring it back. Because, I mean, it's great to go into bed and wear sight and get Gunship 2000, I guess, and blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But it's really great to be able to pay a developer to make these. You know what I mean? It's great to be able to pay a developer to create something like this. So, and that's what I would always prefer, is to pay a developer, while I can afford it at least, is to pay a developer to make a thing I love, And so I'm really glad. Wait, Voodoo. Oh, that's interesting. Voodoo 288 in the chat says, it wasn't until playing Nuclear Option that I realized at 38 how much I wanted a casual flight sim. Oh, look at that.
It is an exceptional game. Absolutely no arguments.
Welcome, my friend. Hopefully you will find other options. Hopefully you don't mind older graphics and go back and play F-117A and F-19 and Pacific Air War, and European. I'm trying to think of the ones that are on sale. European Air War. The Enemy Engaged games are great. Those are you can buy those. Hind and Apache. Those are great. Tornado now.
EF2000.
EF2000. Yeah, you can't buy EF2000. I'm trying to think of the ones you can
sadly
buy digitally. Yeah, you can buy Eurofighter Typhoon, but nowhere. Don't. Just don't. And if you go to Steam and look up Gunship, don't buy that one either, because that's the Gunship.
I'm guessing EF2000 isn't very good.
No, Eurofighter 2000. Eurofighter 2000 is not very good. It's like they tried to make, because it came out after 2000 and like, okay, no one wants to fly with a joystick anymore. We have to dumb this down. And so they tried, but it just ended up not being very good as a result, which is a real damn shame. But when you realize that one of Did's final games was called Wargasm, you're like, oh no.
Oh boy.
Eurofighter Typhoon isn't bad, but compared to EF2000, it's definitely a step down. But I'm trying to think of the ones you can buy and play it. Oh, Mega Fortress, of course you could buy. Mega Fortress. So there are a lot of classic flight sims you can still get. I wish you could buy the Jane's games, like we said earlier. You cut your teeth on Jane's. Oh my God, I wish you could still buy those. Oh my God. I mean, I think the only Jane's flight sim you can even get close to working these days is Fighter's Anthology, which is admittedly one of my favorites, but I think that's only because it doesn't have 3D acceleration. So it's not looking for.
That's why you can make it work.
Yeah, exactly. Like the more modern ones, they're looking for a voodoo card or whatever. It's like, God damn it. And again, you can get them working via emulation, but that is a whole thing. So again, it is great that these newer flight sims are coming out that are more accessible and approachable. So folks, if you haven't checked out Tiny Combat Arena, if you haven't checked out Nuclear Option, Helicopter Gunship DEX, if you have VR, definitely check out VTOL VR. It is excellent. That's true. The first Longbow game you can play in DOSBox. That's true. And
that's something.
And you can, if you.
But sadly, not the second.
Yeah, and there are some games, if you like, it's weird. You can get Windows like 95/98 working in DOSBox, but they're fiddly, and I wouldn't recommend it. But I have played.
That is 2 layers of emulation, which is.
I know.
Oh boy.
Like, I have a version of SU-27 that runs on Windows 95 in DOSBox, and it's passable. It's not great, but it's passable.
That's the most charitable you can be to it. Passable.
I mean, the worst to get running is probably those old A10 Mac games. Remember those? A10 Attack and A10 Cuba. You can get those running on a Mac emulator, but it ain't easy. I did it, but it took like a couple of hours to get it to run. It was worth it.
Problem.
Yeah, that's right. The older were those Jane's games like USNF, U.S. Navy Fighters, ATF? Were those Jane's, or were those before they used the Jane's label? I can never remember.
I mean, it was before they got the Jane's label.
I think ATF might have had the Jane's label, maybe. God, I can. But you're right, Damson, that those older ones did use DOS. That's true, because they were Windows 95 and DOS. Thank you for that. But they're also sadly not sold digitally. So U.S. Navy Fighters wasn't Jane's. This is where I always get confused. So U.S. Navy Fighters wasn't Jane's. ATF and NATO Fighters was Jane's. And then, of course, Fighters Anthology.
A little convoluted. And
then Fighters Anthology, of course, was Jane's. Oh, ATF was the first Jane's? Oh my God, this is why I always get confused. This is why I always get confused. Back in the 90s, you guys, there were so many flight sims coming out. It was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful time. But yeah, you can get Fighters Anthology working in modern Windows, which is all those games we just mentioned, U.S. Navy fighters, ATF, NATO fighters. It's all those things in one package, plus some other stuff as well. So yeah, if you can track down a copy of Fighters Anthology, you can get that running, and it's terrific. It's got so much content, that one. Oh my God. I think it's got a Korea campaign, a Vietnam campaign, and a bunch of other campaigns. It's got a mission editor. It's got a mission builder. That one's amazing. Yeah, that one's great. I'm looking forward to revisiting Fighters Anthology. It's probably my favorite of the Jane's flight sims, honestly. But again, not available to purchase digitally, which is a crime. Maybe someday it will be. But sadly not right now. So, God, yeah, folks, if you're listening to this and you haven't really tried a combat flight sim, get F-117 on sale on GOG or Steam. Not the NES version. That's not what I'm talking about. There's an NES version of F-117. That's not what I'm talking about.
A very different game.
Very, 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 very different game. I played it for the first time recently because it's on the Switch. And wow, that is a very different game. Like in F-117, the PC or Amiga or whatever version, you're flying typically at 200 feet. On the NES version, if you go under 2,000 feet, it yells at you. It's like, hey, you're flying too low. It's like, what the This is so weird. Oh yeah, Richard, I just mentioned enemy engaged a moment ago, but yeah, the two enemy engaged games you can get on GOG, I believe, and then there's a mod that I forget what it's called. There's a mod. Even without mods, those are great, but there's a mod that makes them a little more modern for like widescreen displays and stuff. But I think it's a little buggy. But the enemy engaged games are great. I think Helicopter Gunship DEX is trying to skirt the line between Gunship 2000 and Enemy Engaged, which are two great lines to be between. So more power to them. I have seen Bismarck. I have seen How do you even say that? Vincimus? Vincimus? Vincamus? I don't know how you say it. I crashed so much in that one, but that one's pretty good too. Vincimus. Let me see if I can get a link. Yeah, that came out recently, I believe. And that one's not bad. Yeah, Vincimus. This guy. It's called Vincimus Air Combat. Came out back in September it came out. And yeah, that one's pretty good. I have not gotten past the first mission because every time I try and strafe stuff on the ground, I crash. But I enjoyed it. I just, I need to get back to it. It's still in early access. Hasn't been updated. Oh, it was updated. No, it hasn't been updated since September. Hopefully. Oh, it came out in April of last year. I misread that. So that one's pretty good. So yeah, I'm glad more people are making games like these. Because for a while our pickings were basically DCS and IL-2 and a few scattered arcadey things like Ace Combat and whatnot. So I'm really glad more sims like this are coming out. So yeah, I think that is good coverage for the topic. Unless anyone had anything they wanted to add before we wrap up. Okay.
Not for me.
All right. Yeah. Sorry guys. I think two or three of us kind of dominated this conversation, and I apologize.
It do be like that sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
As scientists say.
Yeah, sometimes it's like that. But next week on the show, we're going to do a check-in, talk about what we're playing, talk about what we're doing, talk to you in the chat about how you're doing. It's a new year. How are we all feeling? I'll tell you what, us in America, not feeling so great. We can talk
for a bunch of reasons.
For many reasons. We can talk about that next week. And kind of in the flight sim arena, tomorrow on the stream, I am going to be playing a game called, what the hell's it called? I can never remember the name. Hang on. It's a World War I sandbox / flight sim called Skies Above the Great War.
Oh, peculiar.
Yeah. Apparently, it's a war game, but you also get to fly the planes whenever you want. So that's what we're going to try tomorrow. Because it kind of looks a little Red Baron-y. And I'm good with that because I love the Red Baron games. Totally fine with that. So yeah, that's going to do it for today. Folks, thanks so much for listening. Great chat today, by the way. Thanks for all the game recommendations in the chat. Damson, sir, always good to see you. Salute. We're not worthy. But folks, and all that. But folks, thank you for hanging out. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Get all the shots. Wear your masks. I can't believe I have to keep saying this, but please get all your shots. Wear your masks. Masks work. I'm just going to say it again. Masks work. My wife had COVID a few months ago, and because of masks, I didn't get it, even though we live in the same 1,000 square feet apartment. So please wear your masks, get your shots, do all the right things because we live in a goddamn society. And thank you as always to our patrons for literally keeping the lights around here. And with that, we'll see you back here tomorrow morning for Skies Above the Great War, which I hope is good. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.